Para dictar la ponencia del género Stanhopea, ¿hay algo nuevo? Invitamos a pasar al escenario a Rudolf Jenny, investigador asociado al herbario Hans Tenz de la Universidad de Basilea, Suiza. Actualmente es secretario general del European Orchid Council y ha sido conferencista en eventos científicos alrededor del mundo, y su especialidad es el género Stanhopea.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to present you something about the genus which is very well known for growers, hobbyists. It's widely distributed in cultivation, but it also has doesn't work somehow. But it also has a very long history. I don't want to get too deep in that, but just to show you that Stanhopea belongs to the very first orchids known from Central America. What you see here is the first illustration of a Stanhopea. Don't ask me to spell that name up there. It's from 1628. It was collected by Hernando Fernandez in Mexico, and it's the first illustration of the genus we have. These are illustrations of the same plant later on, and as very usual in Stanhopea, we will see that later, people get blinded, taxonomists get blinded by the color of the flowers. So usually the average number of synonyms for all Stanhopea species is about 1 to 5. That means each species has an average of 5 synonyms, which is based on color variation. This is the plant named by Schlechter, Stanhopea hernandezii. One of the species very, very easy to recognize. There are others more difficult. The second one followed in history is this one here. It was described as Epidendrum grandiflorum by Humboldt and Bonpland, collected by Humboldt and Bonpland, and the drawing was made based on dried material. So you see, so you see the inflorescence is coming out on top of the zygote and it's erect. That's the typical mistake happens when the drawings have been made later on based on dried specimens. This is the plant. It was named much later as Stanhopea jennischiana. That has nothing to do with my name. And they couldn't use the name grandiflora based on the Basidium epidendrum grandiflorum because there was already a Stanhopea grandiflora. And then in 1829, the story of Stanhopea itself started when the genus was described in Curtis Botanical Magazine with those 2 plates based on Stanhopea insignis, which is the type species of the genus, coming from Brazil. I talked about color variation. What you see here is Stanhopea insignis from Brazil, that's the type species, and you see the enormous variability of color of those flowers. This is all the same species. If you put those flowers in alcohol for a couple of weeks, so you get rid of the color, and you put the lips one beside the other, you will see that it is exactly the same. And you can understand now why things like this one, here, this one was described as Stanhopea albescens, just because it was white. Now, there are white Stanhopeas. This is Stanhopea grandiflora. It was described in 1834, and it's one of those species which you see quite often in cultivation. It's distributed over a wide area in South America. It's a beautiful flower, and we will come back to that later on, just to show you the characteristics of this plant are the two horns here at the hypocyle. Now let's have a look, when is a Stanhopea? Although you can find quite a number of species growing terrestrially, the plant itself is a typical epiphyte. It's unifoliate, the leaves are plicate, they are normally leathery and hard in substance, and the pseudobulbs are looking always the same in those dried old sheets. It's almost impossible to say which species you have in hand without flowers. All those who have bought Stanhopea somewhere at the fair or at the show and believed in the label, they should know that they never should buy plants without flowers. The inflorescences are usually coming out of the basis of the pseudobulb, and with the exception of a few species are pendant. You see here young inflorescence, you see here one with the buds. It's interesting to see that if you look at the development of the buds, there is a certain time, a couple of days, where the development of the buds seems to stop. Nothing happens. They don't grow bigger and they don't open. That's the time when the plant starts to fill up the osmophores, the cells producing the fragments, with raw material. So that takes some time. Then let's have a look at the morphology of the flowers. As Günther Gerlach said concerning the problems to describe the Gongora lip, in Stanhopea it's rather similar. We have the pollinarias, normally two pollinias with a short stipes and the large residuum. That's the part glowing on the bee, because all Stanhopeas are pollinated by euglossina bees. Then we have here the column with the anther cap, and here we have the lip, and the lip is the only, for determination of the species, more or less the only interesting part. You see here the drawing of the lip. We have the hypocyle, the basis part, then we have the mesocyle with the two horns, and we have the epicyle here. So this is the hypocyle, the mesocyle, and the epicyle. And as I said before, Stanhopeas are pollinated by bees. They are attracted by the fragrance, and only the male bees are attracted. What you see here are two pics of the pollinator of Stanhopea reichenbachiana. This is a pollinia from another flower. Those pictures are from Guillermo Angulo. And you see here what happens after pollination. This is Stanhopea tigrina, and you see how the seed pod develops. Now, Stanhopea seed pods are relatively large, and they contain somewhere, it depends to the source you refer to, between 100,000 and 500,000 seeds. Now let's have a look to some of the well-known species in the genus, just to give you an impression. This is an outstanding species. This was described originally as Stanhopeastrum. Reichenbach said it's not a typical Stanhopea, but a couple of years later he said, well, it's probably still a Stanhopea, so he put it back to Stanhopea. This is a Central American lowland species, and it's the only one with this shoe-like lip, which looks very different from all other species in the genus. And This is a species you can cross with almost everything else from the same subtribe, Stanhopea. So you'll see that later. Then we have two species of the, what we call more primitive ones of the genus. This is Stanhopea. This is Stanhopea cula. This is Stanhopea annulata. No, it's also annulata, sorry. This is the Ecuadorian form of annulata. This is the Colombian one. And the Central American one from northern Colombia and Panama, Stanhopea avicula. This species was described only in 1989. And we know today that the plant was in cultivation some years before, but it was labeled Stanhopea annulata. Stanhopea oculata is taxonomically seen a nightmare for the very simple reason that there are areas where this plant grows together with Stanhopea graveolens in Chiapas and in Guatemala, and it forms natural hybrids. So what we find there in populations is everything between both parent species and the first generation hybrids and all kind of back crosses. So you can find on the same tree 5 plants with entirely different lip forms. Here you see some examples of oculata. That's what we think is the true oculata. Stanhopea ruceri, it was long known as Stanhopea inodora. Inodora means no fragrance. Now, you have to see that the fragrance is not made for human noses, so even if we can't smell the fragrance, for the bee it's still fragrant. And some of those clones we can smell. And you see again here the variability in coloration. This is an almost light, cream white form. This is the normal form, normal colored form of the same species. Then we have the problem of Stanhopea wardii. Stanhopea wardii is from Costa Rica and down to Venezuela. And it's probably, besides Stanhopea tigrina, the one most often seen in cultivation. Interestingly enough, we have collected material from Peru. And there is nothing known about Stanhopea wardii from Ecuador and from southern Colombia. So we thought that it might be a reminder of an older population, so to say an island, and it was described as Stanhopea gruerii. I'm not sure that this will stand. We need to see material from Peru and have fragrance analysis and information about the pollinators. So this is the drawing published together with the Peruvian wardii. You see, it's not only difficult to describe those lips, it's also difficult to make drawings of them, because the drawing is relatively lousy. It's better here. That's from the same publication, Schweinfurt Orchids of Peru. And here you see what we usually do when we try to compare different clones. We put them in alcohol so that the color gets out, and then you really see the structure. Again, Stanhopea wardii. This is the normal color form. Here. That's the normal color form. This is an aberrant color form. We know also forms of wardii without eye spots, about this one. And we know it also bright yellow and bright white. So they are really variable in many aspects. Then the best known species in the genus, Stanhopea tigrina from Mexico. The variability is enormous. Some forms are described as Stanhopea nigroviolacea, but I think it's exactly the same as tigrina. They are variable in color and in size, but what is always the same is the distance here between column, the epicyle, and the two horns. So to say, the channel formed by the tip of the lip and the column, where the bee has to pass to take the pollinias with it and to pollinate the flower. So this distance seems to be constant in all those different clones of Tigrina, whether they are small flowered or big flowered. Then we have found in a normal population of normal Tigrinas, we have found this, and we have found this. This was described under about 5 different names: Forma flava, variety flava, variety xanthina, etc. It's just an anthocyanin-free form of Tigrina. Now let's come to some of the relatively recently described species. This is Stanhopea maduroi from the border between Colombia and into Panama. It was described in 1998, and originally, when I got first material of that plant in my hand, I thought that it might be just a yellow form of Stanhopea platyceras, but it's not. It's similar, it's closely related, but it's not platyceras. That's a beautiful large flower, pure yellow, we don't know any other color forms, and very seldom seen in cultivation. Then we have Stanhopea napoensis from Ecuador down to Rio Napo. This plant was collected, as far as I know, only once. They collected 3 plants. One went into the herbarium, another one disappeared, and one went to California in the collection of one of the botanical gardens. And the disappeared plant showed up many years later in Australia. I got some pictures and pickled flowers asking what could that be, and it was this Stanhopea napoensis. So the plant seems to be very, very local endemic. We haven't seen it for years collected in other places. Then we have from Brazil another new species from 2010 from named Stanhopea dueralarensis. Oh God. And interestingly enough, this seems to be another species like Insignis from Brazil with a very, very high variability in color. You don't see plants with identical coloration. These are all plants from the same collection. That means they have been collected in the same area together. Then we have Stanhopea warshawicziana, Koch, described very long ago in 1852. This is one of the very easy recognizable species, and it's a rarity in cultivation. It comes from Costa Rica. It was originally described in Costa Rica. It may be also distributed in Panama. We got a couple of flowers from there without precise locality, but Panama. Then we have Stanhopea stevensonii. This plant was illustrated in the memory booklet of the World Orchid Conference in Medellín in, I think it was 75 or something like that. 72, sorry. And it was named Stanhopea stevensonii without description, so the name was invalid. And after I have got material from Colombia of many of those plants, I reactivated the name from Escobar and Mejia. This plant is quite often seen in cultivation and is very often named Stanhopea jennischiana, which is wrong. Then we have Stanhopea novogaliciana and Stanhopea intermedia. Stanhopea intermedia is from Mexico. It's a relatively high altitude plant, and it's almost absent in cultivation. And Rosillo described in 1984 Stanhopea novogaliciana. But again, although the color is very different, and this is a pretty thing, If you put it in alcohol, so you get the red color out, there is no morphological difference with intermediate. So I believe it's the same species. Then we have Stanhopea ospine, described in '67 from Colombia. The species long missed in cultivation. We haven't seen it for many years, and then it showed up. Obviously, someone propagated it from seed, and it was sold as Stanhopea wardii. So that's what I said, never buy a Stanhopea without seeing the flowers. Stanhopea marisayana from Peru, from the area of Cusco, or from Cusco, from the area around Aguascalientes, down below the Machu Picchu. This was described in 2003, and this is a flower of the type species. This is a beautiful thing, well worth to grow, and today we have seedlings. I think in Peru they made seedlings of it. Then we have Stanhopea manrique, also coming from Peru, not in cultivation as far as I know, except in the collection of Alfredo Manrique in Lima. We have seen only one form of that, that's the type plant. We haven't seen more, and Alfredo told me that he never found it again. Then we have Stanhopea posade, described in 1993. That's a very showy plant, and there are forms in cultivation with pure black, dark red, I should say, dark purple petals. These are two sister species. One is Stanhopea frumere, that's a lowland species from Ecuador, described in '75 by Carl Dodson. And the other one is Stanhopea in gray, that's the intermediate altitude form. They are not absolutely identical, but they are very, very close together. And I'm not sure whether they use the same set of pollinators and are therefore just forms of the same species. Sometimes it's very difficult to see what you have in your hands. These are three species from Mexico and Central America. And just to show you what taxonomy means. This here is Stanhopea saccata. This is Stanhopea pseudoradiosa, and this is Stanhopea radiosa from northern Mexico. The difference, if you look just at the flower, we'll see that later, they are all orange, spotted, they look the same beside the size. But if you look at the morphology, those broad horns in saccata forming a lip which looks like tree-lopped, which is not, it's just because it's folded. And then you see those triangular horns here of pseudoradiosa, and this hypokeel opening, which is rectangular, but narrow rectangular, and then you see radiosa with this very deep sac, the broad horns again, and a broad opening of the hypokyle. The osmophores, the cells producing the fragrance, are here in the hypokyle. That's the place where the bee tries to get in to collect the fragrance and do the job then by falling out of the flowers. Now this is radiosa. Now look at the color, look at the dots. And now the next one should be pseudoradiosa. So for the first look, they look almost the same. And this is saccata. And this here is the normal size saccata. That's the normal clone you find. This here is a clone from Costa Rica, which is about a third larger. But again, size is not the limiting factor, because this gap here, positioning the bee when the bee is falling out of the flower, that's the important part. And we know from other species that if you have 20 flowers on an inflorescence, the terminal flower is about a third smaller than the first flower on top. But that doesn't matter because all the parts which are important for pollination, they have the right size. Stanhopea hasselowniana from Brazil. This is a plant with a very, very large lip, almost absent in collections, and it was lost for a long time, and it was described, most probably it was described also under the name of Stanhopea molliana. Stanhopea deltoidea, described in 1862, unknown until about 20 years ago when some plants showed up. It's one of the species you can easily recognize by this very, very small hypokyle and the tremendous large horns here. It's relatively seldom seen, but today we have seedlings. Okay, now let's go to something else. This was originally described as Stanhopea rhodocasiana by Pius and Gognon, the top one here. This is the only species you would have been able to separate or to identify without seeing flowers, because the plant looks different. And also the whole morphology of the lip is different, so Dodson took it out in 1980 and formed a known genus, the genus Embrea. It would be a monospecific or monotypic genus, but this plant here was in cultivation at a botanical garden in Germany for many, many years, and it was labeled Stanhopea rhodocasiana. And the head gardener told me several times, it's different, it cannot be rhodocasiana. Have a look to the lip. And I did. And if you compare now those two species, you see here you have a very long cone fruit, here there is almost none. Here you have a very flat hypokyle, here you have a saccate hypokyle, and this is the plant from Ecuador, and this is the plant from Colombia. So these are two different species. Stanhopea tricornis. It was described under several names. Here we have it as Stanhopea langlasiana and as Stanhopea convoluta. It's the same species, but the coloration was different. So they thought these are different species. This is, by the way, one of the few species without horns on the mesokyle, but with petals holding the cone and the lip, taking over the job of the horns to channel the bee. Now, Stanhopea tricornis is extremely variable in color, and this is a species we have seen before, Stanhopea reichenbachiana, normally pure white with a very few red spots, and both share a part of their distribution area. They overlap, and both share at least one common pollinator, and the result of that is this here. That's the natural hybrid. Now, natural hybrids of Stanhopeas, except the oculata complex, are found only occasionally and never in populations, always as single plants. The reason for that is that they obviously in nature do not propagate because the pollination mechanism is not working. If you put the plants in cultivation, if you pollinate them by hand, you get fertile seeds. That's not a problem. So the result of this cross, you see here the parents, tricornis and reichenbachiana, the result is fertile. And here you see the lips, that's reichenbachiana, that's tricornis, And here you see absolutely intermediate, the hybrid. That's the natural hybrid. So you see, here you have a divided opening of hypokyle, here you have the ovate one, and here you have the intermediate form. Now, this is a headache. It was a headache, I have to say. When I finished my Stanhopea monograph in 2010, and I got the book first time in my hand, I got an email from Harry Selenko in Ecuador. Now, just to explain why, this is a natural hybrid between Stanhopea grandiflora and Stanhopea wardii. And you see the grandiflora parent, the horns, the basal horns here. And it was described long ago by Lindley, and he made this beautiful drawing, and this is the type specimen in the Lindley herbarium. And I never have seen that plant, so I said, okay, I put it in the book as it existed somewhere, but it's lost. And when I opened the book, I got this email, and Harry asked me, this is a picture of an unknown Stanhopea, could you have a look at it? And guess what it was? It was this. This is a photograph I got from Günter Gerlach, because Harry's photo was not very good. So this is Stanhopea quadricornis, another natural hybrid. And you see here very clear the impact of Stanhopea grandiflora, the horns, and the eye spot from the other parent. Now I said, is there something new in Stanhopea? Now let's have some pics here, of which I can't tell you what it is. This is most probably a primary hybrid between Stanhopea platyceras and something else. Probably it's again wardii, we don't know. In the area where this plant was collected in Colombia by Juan Felipe Posada, he sent me the material. In the same area you'll find platyceras, that's platyceras, and you'll find this one here, and that is probably the result of that. It's a beautiful large flower, and I'm waiting for a second clone from an independent source to describe it. Then we have this one. This is a plant in collection of Marnie Turkle in California. And for the first look I said it's Rucori, but it's not. And the problem here is, if you ask them, people sending you material, you ask them from where do you have the material? The answer is, well, I'm not sure, it's South America. Now that's a little bit difficult to describe something with origin South America, because that fits together with half of the genus. And it's a single plant, and it's also difficult to judge based on a single plant what it is. So here I'm waiting for more material. So if you recognize this, let me know. Then we have this. This is from Colombia. It looked first like Stanhopea schutelworthii, and then it looks like Stanhopea schilleriana, but it's not. So we don't know what that is. It's certainly not an already described species, and it's collected in Antioquia. It's a plant out of nature. It's not an artificial hybrid. Then we have this. This is certainly another natural hybrid. There are two reasons to recognize natural hybrids. As soon as both parents are different in size, you see deformation here on the hypokyle. So whenever you have an inflorescence with heavy deformations here between the different flowers, then the chance is quite big that it could be a natural hybrid. And again, it was out of a collection. No origin. We are not even sure that it's not an artificial hybrid. Again, this. We have no idea what it is. it was come from Glucksmann from Venezuela, and it seems to be also a natural hybrid, but we don't know. And just to show you what would be ideal in concerning information about Stanhopeas, that's here. Ricardo Joria, he collected a Stanhopea right here. This is the surrounding, this is the plant, and this is the tree where he got the plant. So we know exactly from where it is. And this is the normal Stanhopea litzae from Brazil. That's a well-known plant. Here. And this, oh, that's not the one. That's litzae, and that's litzae, and that is litzae. And this is the one Ricardo collected. So, for the first look, I would say its litzae is just a smaller form, but it has to be confirmed. But at least here we have a clear idea from where the plant is, who collected it, when and where, and we have good photographic material. Now, naturally, growers are not happy with what nature is doing, so they try to make it better. What you see here are artificial Stanhopea hybrids, most of them from Dick Hartley in the United Kingdom. This is a hybrid with Stanhopea insignis. Also this one, this is a hybrid with Stanhopea grandiflora. This is a hybrid with Stanhopea napoensis. Now, they are nice, but are they really better than what you have seen before? And then naturally, people start to do strange things. They put a Corianthus together with a Stanhopea, that's speciosa with Stanhopea oculata, that's the result. Now, this is interesting, but don't tell me that it is beautiful. It's strange, I'm sorry, but then we have the cross between, you remember, our first picture of Stanhopea bonita, together with the polycycnis, done by Clarence Horich, by the late Clarence Horich in Costa Rica. This is the result. Stanhocycnis inspiration. This is the only picture I have because I don't think that the plants exist anymore. But this is a result. You can say, okay, it looks not bad. Then we have done this. This is Stanhopea hernandezii by Gongora galeata. Now look at that. Is this something, is that an advantage? Then we have even worse. We have Stanhopea insignis by Cirhea, by Cirhea. That's Stanhopea. Well, but, sorry, I missed that. But there are exceptions. One of the problems of Stanhopea is that the flowers are lasting only for a couple of days. Because it's an enormous amount of energy the plant invests in those flowers, in the fragments and in the massive flower. So the plant will die if the flower will last longer than a couple of days. But there are other genera in the Stanhopeae tribe, subtribe, which are different because they last longer. One is Acineta. So if you cross Acineta with an Embrea, which is also short-lasting, then you get this one. And these are really beautiful plants. So here I would say that's a way to follow. Or this one here, these are Stanhopea crenata by Acineta erectroxantha, and Stanhopea stevensonii by Acineta superba. And look at this flower, and they last for 10 days. So that's an advantage. So, when you have Stanhopeas, just to finish it, when you have Stanhopeas in your culture and you want to know what species you have, don't get blinded by the color. That's the first step. The second one is make sure you have photos of the important part That's the lip and the column. Because all the other parts here, sepals and petals, they are only to protect the important parts during development. As soon as the flower is open, they get back because they have to go out of the way to make the way free for the bee. So, you look at this part here. That's the important one. And try to find out from where your plant is. Because otherwise, the answer will be accordingly. It's maybe this or maybe that. Okay, thank you very much.